It was supposed to be a simple Saturday morning, the kind of morning where the smell of brewed coffee mingles with old cardboard boxes and the quiet excitement of small-town bargains. My driveway for once was alive. Tables lined with trinkets, tools, books, and all the little forgotten things that accumulate across a lifetime. One man's clutter, another's treasure. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. I'd printed posters, paid the $5 city permit, and even made sure to stay within every rule in the book because in Cedar Pines Estates, rules ruled everything. Still, I should have known that peace in this neighborhood never lasted long. Not with Karen around. Karen lived 3 houses down, a woman who carried authority the way others carried purses. She wasn't on the HOA payroll anymore, not technically, but she acted like she still ran it. Every driveway, every hedge, every newly painted mailbox, all had to pass her imaginary standards, and somehow she believed policing other people was community service. The funny thing is, we used to get along. In the beginning, she was charming, the kind of neighbor who baked cookies for newcomers. But the charm always came with a lecture. The cookies would come with lines like, "Just so you know, the HOA prefers neutral paint tones," or technically, "This fence is an inch too high." By the time my yard sale signs went up, I could practically feel her disapproval from down the street. Still, the morning started perfectly. Neighbors stopped by early, kids laughed, and for once, Cedar Pines felt like a real community. Not a polished trap built on fine print. People traded coins, shared stories, and for a few golden hours it was what every neighborhood should be, normal. But then Karen appeared. You could always tell when she was coming. Her perfume hit before her voice did. That overpowering floral cloud of authoritative energy. She arrived dressed like she was running a city inspection. Clipboard, phone in hand, and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't buy anything. She didn't say, "Good morning." She just stood there, scanning my tables, her eyes stopping on the small cash box sitting neat and full beside me. At first, I thought she was just being her usual nosy self, the same way she peeked into mailboxes and measured lawns with her eyes. But then I noticed her grip tighten around the clipboard. She was calculating something. When noon came and things wound down, I started packing up. That's when she approached me a second time. Her voice was calm, but her words carried the sharpness of scissors hidden behind silk. She informed me that, according to HOA policy, all community sales were technically organized events, which meant profits were to be contributed toward neighborhood upkeep. It took a second to process. She was basically saying she wanted my earnings, money from my garage, my belongings, my work, for her precious imaginary HOA fund. The irony? The real HOA had dissolved 6 months earlier after too many scandals with missing dues. There was no fund, just Karen still pretending to manage one. I didn't argue. I didn't need to, because while she was lecturing me about compliance and civic duty, my porch camera had been rolling, a silent witness to her every word. Later that afternoon, when I ran to grab lunch, I didn't notice her circling back, but my security footage did. Caught her walking straight up to my yard, scanning the property, and then reaching over to open that same cash box. She looked around, slipped several bills inside her purse, and walked away as if she just deposited it into her own moral bank account. When I came home an hour later, the money was lighter, but not gone completely. And neither was the evidence. That night, I replayed the footage. Once, then twice. Each time, that same wave of disbelief burned hotter. She hadn't even tried to be sneaky. She'd done it in broad daylight, confident that no one would dare accuse her of anything. That's when I decided she'd picked the wrong yard to mess with. Because in Cedar Pines, Karen's word used to be law. But in a world with cameras and social media, power doesn't belong to the loudest voice anymore. It belongs to whoever presses upload first. I backed up the footage. Then I took a deep breath. Tomorrow she'd find out what real accountability looked like. And by the time the sun rose on Sunday, one small clip of her donation would change this neighborhood forever. Sunday mornings in Cedar Pines were usually quiet. The kind of quiet where even birds seemed to respect the sound of sprinklers and coffee makers. But not that Sunday. Not the day after Karen's collection for the HOA. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the footage again. The grainy porch camera video wasn't cinematic, but it was enough. It showed everything. Her shape in the frame, the way she looked over her shoulder, the moment her hand slipped into the box, and the way she casually tucked folded cash into her purse. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was conviction. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about truth. Karen had spent years bullying neighbors under the veneer of keeping order. She fined kids for painting chalk art, scolded teens for parking slightly crooked, and once wrote an anonymous letter about someone's Christmas lights being excessively twinkly. She thrived on control because no one ever questioned her authority. Until now. I took a deep breath and uploaded the clip. 32 seconds long, titled simply, HOA Karen tries to confiscate yard sale money for community fund. At first, it didn't attract much attention. Just a few comments from locals laughing about it, calling her out by name. But by afternoon, things moved fast. Very fast. Someone shared it on a neighborhood Facebook group. Then someone else cross-posted it to Reddit. By evening, it hit a local news station's Facebook page under the headline, Caught on Camera. Woman tries to take homeowner's yard sale cash, claims HOA authority. That's when the wildfire began. Within 24 hours, tens of thousands had watched it. By the next morning, hundreds of thousands. The comments poured in like a tidal wave of disbelief and collective fury. People called her everything from the suburban tax collector to Cedar Pine's self-appointed dictator. The thing about the internet, it doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive hypocrisy. Karen's name became a trending tag. Memes exploded. Someone photoshopped her holding a cash register under the caption, "All donations go to my ego fund." Another turned screenshots of her into fake motivational posters. Steal small. Think petty. At first, she tried to deny it. She claimed the footage was edited, that she only collected voluntary contributions. But every attempt to defend herself just made things worse. Screenshots of her old neighborhood messages resurfaced. Years of her threatening, demanding, and lecturing people who dared to step outside her imaginary HOA guidelines. Neighbors who once tolerated her began posting their own stories. A man revealed she'd once tried fining him for a rusted mailbox screw. A woman wrote she'd been told to remove her bird fountain because it was distracting to visitors. Each story fanned the flames higher. By midweek, reporters drove through Cedar Pines. News vans parked beside her manicured lawn while journalists knocked at her door. She didn't answer. Curtains stayed drawn, driveway empty. But cameras still rolled, and the footage of her closed blinds aired alongside the viral clip of her reaching into my cash box. I hadn't expected the attention to snowball. Honestly, I thought maybe her pride would take a hit, she'd apologize, and life would go back to normal. But what happened next made that impossible. The local station did a follow-up interview with a surprise guest. It turned out Karen owed the HOA over $2,000 in unpaid dues she'd been collecting for maintenance projects that no one could verify. The old HOA bank account had long been closed, yet she continued gathering money from gullible neighbors who thought they were still supporting the board. People started asking where that money went. That's when she disappeared. One morning, her car was gone, the driveway clear. The house behind darkened windows looked abandoned. Word spread she'd taken personal leave and fled to stay with relatives in another city. Whether out of shame or fear, no one knew. In most neighborhoods, that would have been the end. The local gossip cycle would have moved on. But Cedar Pines was still burning with righteous indignation. For years, she'd ruled everyone like they were her tenants. Her downfall wasn't just karma, it was freedom. And people weren't done celebrating that freedom. That weekend, residents did something symbolic, something she would have hated. They organized a community-wide yard sale. Every driveway on every street was filled with tables, posters, and laughter. Dozens of little cash boxes sat out proudly. Every homeowner promised half their proceeds would go to a cause they all agreed on. The local children's hospital. No one called it revenge. They called it taking back their power. When the totals came in, they'd raised nearly $10,000. All from the same driveways Karen once policed for unauthorized gatherings. Standing there that Saturday evening, the sun dipping low and the sound of laughter drifting through the street, I realized something. Karen wasn't just a villain. She was a reminder, a living example of what happens when rules replace respect. The flagrant hypocrisy, the desperate need for control, the belief that her authority was absolute. It had finally imploded. But Cedar Pines wasn't free yet. The story was still spreading. And by the time national news caught wind, Karen's little act of greed would become more than local infamy. It would become proof that people were done being bullied by those who thought power was their hobby. By Sunday morning, the world wasn't just watching Cedar Pines. They were cheering for it. It's funny how fast the internet can build someone up or tear them apart. In Karen's case, it didn't just tear. It devoured. By Monday morning, her name was everywhere. The clip of her money collection was now featured on countless reaction channels, subreddit threads, and viral TikToks stitched with sarcastic commentary. Corporate Karen, they called her. Yard sale tyrant. The HOA queen of greed. The moment she slipped that handful of bills into her purse had become one of those infamous freeze frames, the kind that ends up in compilation videos titled, "When Karma Hits in 4K. Within 48 hours, her face was recognizable far beyond Cedar Pines. And it wasn't because of beauty or charm, it was because of arrogance. But while the internet laughed, the neighborhood held its breath. No one had seen her since she left town the week before. Her house sat dark, porch lights off, blinds drawn tight. Some said she'd gone to stay with family. Others whispered that she'd checked into a wellness retreat. Whatever the truth was, she couldn't run from the court of public opinion. Reporters camped outside her house, drones buzzing above the cul-de-sac. People who'd once rolled their eyes at her constant HOA emails now laughed watching news anchors recite her name. The irony was rich. Cedar Pines had become famous for the thing it once tried to suppress: individuality. But what started as online humor slowly turned heavier. Someone leaked more. Old HOA records, emails, fines, receipts surfaced one by one. Proof that for years, Karen had pocketed administrative fees from homeowners who never asked for her help. Evidence that she'd once forged the signature of a board member who had moved away. Her scams, buried under bureaucracy, were finally unwrapped for everyone to see. Suddenly the story wasn't about one stolen cash box. It was about a pattern of abuse that went on for years. The local authorities opened an inquiry. Bank statements were subpoenaed. She went from viral laughingstock to active investigation. And that's when the laughter turned to reflection. For a lot of Cedar Pines residents, there was guilt. They'd let her get away with it for so long. Not because they agreed, but because it was easier to stay quiet. Most people had just wanted peace, even if peace came at the cost of submission. They'd watched her bully, fine, and threaten others and done nothing. But now that the internet held up a mirror, they saw their silence for what it was: permission. That realization changed everything. The community that used to whisper about her now spoke loudly. Not about gossip, but about accountability. They started rebuilding trust from the ground up, removing what was left of Karen's influence, reworking neighborhood management into something transparent and public. No more self-appointed authority. No more fear. No more rules for your own good. The town launched a community freedom fund. Leftover yard sale proceeds became donations toward community improvements that actually mattered. A new playground, garden boxes for elderly residents, even a covered patio for neighborhood gatherings. Cedar Pines had been ruled by one woman's obsession with control. Now it was being run by everyone's shared understanding of freedom. Meanwhile, the investigation into Karen's finances reached its climax. The state fraud unit confirmed she'd embezzled over $7,000 in payments meant for HOA maintenance. Money she'd used for vacations, parties, and administrative dinners. The news broke on a Wednesday evening. The same network that ran her viral downfall now ran the headline: Former HOA chair faces charges following viral theft clip. They showed side-by-side footage, her smug inspection from the old clip, and then her official mugshot. Eyes hollow, expression shattered. The internet had one last field day. But the people of Cedar Pines didn't celebrate like they used to. because now they knew the real cost of control. A neighborhood once divided by fear was united by compassion. Residents stopped policing each other and started helping instead. Fences that used to mark boundaries became places where folks shared coffee at sunrise. The air even felt different, lighter somehow. The chaos Karen caused had become the seed of something better. And yet, her absence left a strange kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind, something heavier, like a ghost of everything they once tolerated. It lingered every time someone looked at her deserted house, paint peeling, mailbox overflowing, as if the entire building was ashamed of itself. That night, I walked past it on my evening stroll. For years, I'd avoided her property out of habit. Now I paused at the edge of her driveway. The yard was empty, the air still. The same place where she once scolded neighbors for walking on her grass now stood still beneath the same wind that used to carry her demands. For the first time, I realized how small her empire really was. Control, real or imagined, never lasts. It burns bright for a while, built on fear and pride, but eventually, truth sets fire to its foundations. That's exactly what happened here. Our small suburban street had become a symbol for millions who'd watched online. Proof that sometimes all it takes to end tyranny is a camera, a conscience, and the courage to press upload. But Cedar Pines wasn't done writing its story. Not yet, because after the fall came something far bigger, renewal. And the person who once recorded that video was about to see how far a single clip could reach beyond the neighborhood's borders, changing not just a town's reputation, but lives. The world had seen the fall. Now it was time for Cedar Pines to show what came after. The chaos had died down and the cameras were gone. But the echo of everything that happened still lingered. The clip, the headlines, the endless commentary. For months, that video lived rent-free in the collective mind of the internet. But while the world eventually found a new scandal to obsess over, we were left with something far more lasting. Perspective. Karen's downfall had left a scar on the neighborhood. But like most scars, it carried lessons worth keeping. Our quiet, fear-soaked community finally understood what accountability really meant. How easy it was to lose sight of decency when everyone was too polite to push back. That realization changed us in ways none of us could have predicted. The first thing people did was come together. The residents of Cedar Pines decided they'd never let power isolate anyone again. They called a meeting. Not in secret, not under pressure, but openly, with laughter and light. It took place in what had once been Karen's beloved HOA HQ, a space she guarded like a throne. Now it was just a community center, stripped of titles and control. Someone renamed it the Pines Collective, a place for shared decisions instead of top-down orders. No more fines, no enforcement patrols. Instead, there were volunteer groups dedicated to real neighborly care. Mowing lawns for the elderly, organizing cleanups, babysitting, helping new families move in. The transformation was slow, but real. Funny thing was, Karen's story had inspired others far beyond our street. Her scandal became the cautionary tale that cities, podcasts, and even HOA law reform advocates cited as proof of what happens when small power turns toxic. One community 3 towns over even called us asking for guidance on how we rebuild trust. I found myself answering those calls more often than I expected. It started with a local newspaper interview and ended with speaking at a regional housing summit. Me, an ordinary homeowner, standing in front of a crowd explaining how a viral video changed how we viewed leadership. My nervous hands trembled as I spoke, but what I said was simple. Good rules protect people. Bad rules protect power. That line spread almost as fast as the original clip. But this time, the attention wasn't destructive. It was hopeful. Soon, even people who once hid behind Karen's authority began helping rebuild her mess. The same man she fined for his unapproved patio furniture now ran a neighborhood market every summer. The woman punished for wind chimes that were too distracting now led a local art club that painted murals across the town trail. The irony was beautiful. Control had stifled creativity, but freedom lit it up again. Then came the most unexpected thing of all. A letter arrived one afternoon. No return address, just shaky handwriting. I knew that writing. It trembled like it remembered being wrong. It was from Karen. She wrote that she'd watched it all from afar. that she'd lost her job, her marriage, her reputation. She didn't try to justify what she did. She only said she finally understood how lonely power made her, how she'd mistaken authority for purpose, control for value. At the end of the letter, she said she wished she could make it right. Not for herself, but for everyone she hurt. So we gave her that chance. Months later, under the blooming spring trees, Karen returned. No cameras, no noise, just neighbors waiting in cautious silence. She looked older, thinner, but humble in a way I'd never seen before. She asked to help with the next community sale, the same event where everything had started. The same kind of yard sale she once corrupted. People hesitated, but Jack from across the street broke the ice, handing her an empty box and saying simply, "We need all hands this year." From that small act, healing began. By sundown, she was shoulder to shoulder with the same people who'd once feared her, carrying tables, sorting books, even sharing quiet laughs. No one forgot what she did, but they also didn't forget how they'd grown because of it. Cedar Pines had indirectly been reborn through her failure, and maybe that meant forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about moving forward while remembering exactly why you fell in the first place. When the next yard sale ended, we raised another few $1,000s for local charities. No one stole, no one fought, and no one pretended to be in charge. Karen stayed until the very end, quietly packing boxes, handing out lemonade, refusing payment. Before leaving, she stopped for a moment in front of my porch camera. She looked at it, smiled faintly, and nodded. Redemption doesn't erase damage. It redeems through acknowledgement. And on that day, Cedar Pines forgave its past by choosing not to repeat it. But the story wasn't quite finished. Because what came next, a simple, unexpected gesture during our final gathering, would remind everyone just how much we'd changed. And for the first time since that fateful Saturday morning, Cedar Pines finally felt whole again. By the time spring wrapped itself around Cedar Pines again, the neighborhood was unrecognizable in the best way. The lawns looked the same, the houses still matching in their quiet suburban lines, but the soul of the place that had changed forever. It wasn't the kind of change you could photograph. It was the kind you could feel. The snap of tension that used to hum in the air every time rules were mentioned was gone, replaced by laughter that drifted easily from one porch to another. The community wasn't perfect. No place ever is. But it was alive, finally breathing again. The first anniversary of the yard sale incident approached quietly, at least at first. Neighbors joked about it half seriously. Someone suggested doing another charity sale. Another proposed turning it into a no-rules weekend. Eventually, they agreed on something more symbolic. A celebration of freedom, of forgiveness, and of what they'd learned from chaos. The event was simple but heartfelt. Tables lined the cul-de-sac again, filled not with things people wanted to sell, but with things they wanted to share. Plants, art, knickknacks, even homemade cookies. But that afternoon, something none of us expected happened. Karen came back. No announcement, no build-up, just her, stepping out of a faded sedan and walking up the street with hesitant steps. She didn't look like the woman who once ruled with a clipboard and false authority. She looked normal, human. For a heartbeat, the chatter stopped. Heads turned, hands stilled midair. You could feel the whole neighborhood holding one collective breath, unsure which way things would go. But Karen didn't flinch. She carried a small donation box in her hands, with handwritten letters taped to the sides. Community Fund. For good this time, it read. A crooked smile flickered on her face, nervous but genuine. Then something remarkable happened. No one shouted. No one turned her away. Slowly, one by one, people walked over. They dropped coins, small bills, flowers, and notes of thanks into that box. It wasn't about money. It was about meaning. Every contribution was a quiet testament to how much they'd all grown. The past hadn't vanished, but it didn't need to. Because true closure isn't about erasing the scar. It's about owning the story that caused it. When the sun began to set, someone suggested a toast. Cups of lemonade were raised high, everyone standing together under the same sky where it had all begun. The same blue that once framed the viral video heard round the world. There were no dramatic speeches, no declarations of forgiveness. Just smiles, laughter, and the simple truth laid bare. Nobody in Cedar Pines needed a hero anymore. They only needed each other. Later that night, long after everyone packed up their tables, I walked past my porch camera again. The same one that had caught Karen all those months ago. It blinked softly in the evening glow, a quiet sentinel watching over history. Karen's note sat in my mailbox, simple and short. I took once. Today I tried to give back. Thank you for letting me. There were tiny wrinkles on the paper, as if she held it too long before leaving it there. I smiled, folded it neatly, and tucked it beside the still image photo I'd printed from the original video. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how far we'd all come. In the weeks that followed, Cedar Pines became something unexpected. A story other towns wanted to replicate. News outlets revisited the neighborhood again. But this time, it wasn't scandal they were reporting on. It was healing. They titled it From Conflict to Community. The neighborhood that forgave its Karen. Even Karen agreed to speak. Not as a villain, but as a cautionary force turned humbled soul. Her words were calm, measured, and deeply human. You can spend a lifetime enforcing order, she admitted on camera. But if you forget compassion, all you build are fences no one wants to live behind. And with that, the story that once defined division closed on grace. By summer, Karen had moved back permanently, not to reclaim control, but to belong. She tended the community garden now, quietly pruning roses while children ran past, blissfully unaware of the history rooted in the soil beneath them. Sometimes, I still catch her glancing at my porch camera and smiling. I think she knows it's there, but she doesn't mind anymore. Maybe she finds comfort in it. The idea that this time, everything being recorded is real, honest, and right. Cedar Pines didn't just survive its scandal. It learned from it. It became a place where the worst of people gave way to their best, where rules once written in arrogance were replaced by understanding. In the end, one petty act of theft had taught us all something irreplaceable. Community isn't built by control, it's built by kindness. And sometimes redemption starts not with an apology, but with the courage to simply show up again. The video that once burned through the internet remains online, frozen in time. But if you visit Cedar Pines today, you won't see bitterness in anyone's eyes. You'll just see neighbors, happy and free, waving from driveways under the golden light of forgiveness.